My name is Melissa Berry. I'm a 10-year triple negative breast cancer survivor, and I am also the board chair for the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation and the founder of Cancer. And I love spending time with my daughters. I have two daughters. Erica's 17, Maya's almost 21. I can't even believe it as I say that. And I also really love to cook and pretty much do anything outside, and I love 80s music. So to rewind the story a little bit, there's a lot of breast cancer in my family, particularly on my mother's side. So my mother had breast cancer. Her mother had breast cancer. So that's my maternal grandmother, my maternal great aunt, who is my grandma's sister, and my great aunt's daughter, who's my mom's first cousin. We all had breast cancer, and they all had breast cancer rather. And so my mother was pretty adamant about me getting tested for the BRCA gene. So around the time that I was about 32 years old, I decided to get tested for the gene. And I was really afraid to do that because I didn't want to feel like I was, like going to be walking around feeling like, well, when am I going to get breast cancer? And instead I kind of shifted the dialogue with myself. And I thought, you know what, this could be empowering and this could be a GPS, a roadmap to my health. And I will tell you and anyone else who's tuning in that genetic test saved my life. My mother basically saved my life because had I not been tested, I would not have been diagnosed at such an early stage and could have been diagnosed at a much later stage. Triple negative breast cancer is very, very aggressive. And I was lucky enough to have caught it, number one, and to have caught it at stage 1. So my breast cancer story really began there. And then I was actually diagnosed during a routine mammogram. In my particular case, and I always like to frame these answers that everybody is different, and follow up and protocol and going for being monitored is not a one size fits all. So in my particular case, it was going for an MRI, a mammogram, and an ultrasound pretty much every 6 months. So I felt like I call it like, it's like a womb. It's like I felt like I was safe. I was being watched, and, I was not going to get breast cancer. Well, I was really caught off guard because I had just gone for an MRI, and I'm like, okay, mammogram time. Now I live in New Jersey, and I was being followed in New York City at Sloan Kettering. And my doctor, who I loved, was like, Melissa, you don't need to schlep into the city anymore. Go to your local hospital. And I did. And so now I was not even, I was just going for a routine mammogram, and I was not now with any doctor that I normally see. So I went in, and the technician felt my left breast, because it is protocol that they need to do a clinical exam where they feel your breast before the mammogram. And the clinician felt a very, very, very tiny lump on my left breast, and she put a sticker on it. And I was like, I almost wanted to dismiss the whole thing. I'm like, that's impossible. I just had an MRI. I'm fine. They did a mammogram right there. They didn't see anything. They did a biopsy and really didn't see anything. And I really, until they told me, I really didn't think that anything was wrong. I was concerned, but again, I had it in my head that I had this clean MRI. And when the doctor came into the room and said, I see a shadow, that's when I knew that something was really wrong. But thank goodness the head of the cancer center there insisted on doing a deep needle biopsy, because he said he saw a shadow. And thank goodness he did that, because that's where they did detect a cancerous tumor. And because of how quickly it popped up, my oncologist knew right away that it was likely triple negative. One of the toughest things that I ever had to hear. I remember feeling like the room was almost spinning, and I just kept thinking, this can't be, like, this isn't really happening. And I'll never forget, my phone was really low on battery. And I remember like standing outside of the exam room in my robe, like asking someone for a charger. Like, I just felt so alone and afraid, because, it wasn't like the sort of checkup or the appointment where you suspect something. And so maybe you bring your partner or your family member with you. I was by myself, and they did the deep needle biopsy, and then they said, okay, why don't you just go ahead in the waiting room? We're gonna just take a look at it. And then when I saw the doctor come with 2 nurses, I'm like, "Oh, here it comes." And he said, "You have breast cancer." And I remember thinking to myself, it's not, it must not actually be like the breast cancer. This is a mistake. I don't know what's going on. And it was just very surreal, very surreal. But this is why it's so important to really know your body and to really, if you, even if you're like, "Oh, that feels a little funny," because I'll tell you, it felt like if you put like a pea inside your breast and it was just kind of floating around. That's like what it felt like. It was but tiny, tiny, tiny. And I really didn't think it was, and I didn't realize it was there until she was like, "Don't you feel that?" I was like, "Oh." I mean, it was almost undetectable. But this is why we really need to know our bodies, and also not to beat ourselves up if we miss something, or maybe you think you dismiss it. This is why we rely on our doctors also to monitor us and know what your, that's why it's so important to get mammograms at an earlier age, like so that you have this baseline. I didn't even know that there were different types of breast cancer, and that's why I am so passionate about my role as board chair for the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation, because it is so important that we know that, first of all, there are different types of breast cancer, and not to Google it if you have breast cancer, because there are not only so many different types, but that means there's so many different treatments. Triple negative breast cancer lacks estrogen and receptors, so it's very difficult to treat. There's you know there's this chemotherapy and there's surgery, and there's so much work that's being done and so much research, and we are really moving the needle, and we're starting to see some change there, because we used to say that there was no targeted treatment, but we're getting closer and closer. But it is definitely trickier and more aggressive. It was like the next day. I actually saw my breast surgeon the next day, and it was pretty imminent that it was, surgery and chemotherapy. And listen, we all have choices, we all have options. But the way that it was presented to me is that if you want to get rid of this cancer and live, then this is what we need to do. And I put my trust in my doctors, and thank God that I did. And I did have ACT chemotherapy and a bilateral mastectomy. I actually had the surgery first, and then the chemo. And again, for anyone that is listening, I'm not offering medical advice. And again, this is 10 years ago, and it depends on the stage and the type. And there's, so many different ways to deal with it. But that's, in my case, that was how we did it. I mean, there's obviously a really emotional side to this, because they're your breasts. Like, when you're a little girl, you're like, "Oh, look, they're growing," and they're a part of your body. They're a part of your femininity. And then for me, I was, lucky enough to have children. I nursed both of my babies. We're always like trying bras on, like, how do they look? It's a part of our anatomy. It's a part of how we carry ourselves. And I remember the night before, you have to do a special wash before surgery. And I remember actually looking at them and saying goodbye, because I didn't really know how else to deal with it. And it was really, really, really hard, because they're you. It's your body. But the way that I kind of tried to cancel it out is like, okay, you've served me. Thank you very much. And now it's time for the cancer to go bye-bye. So it's like, instead of looking like a loss, I'm like, I'm going to win, and I'm going to get rid of the cancer. So yeah, I mean, that was, there's none of us are given, instructions on how to handle trauma like this. So it's interesting how our brain works. So I did have a bilateral mastectomy, and I did have I was given the option about, which implants. I mean, to be honest with you, there wasn't much conversation of whether I wanted to be flat or not. And I know that's more common now, which is it makes me so happy, because I think we should know what all of our options are. and never assume anything. And in my case, I did want to uh, reconstruct my breasts, and I wanted them to be as close to my natural breasts as possible. And I did go the implant surgery route. It was several hours. The recovery wasn't terrible, but reconstruction is a couple of surgeries, and in some cases, it could be multiple surgeries. Again, everyone is different. When you first have a bilateral mastectomy, if you are going to reconstruct, they put expanders inside the chest cavity so that they can then fill them with fluid to see, what size your chest can accommodate. And then you have what's called swap surgery or the implant surgery, where you actually have then the implants put in. So that was how I approached it. Honestly, 10 years later, I still feel like I'm trying to process. It's sometimes I'm like, wait, that happened. It's wild, but one thing I taught myself was to just take it in baby steps, and that's what I tell the newly diagnosed. If you look at your whole schedule of appointments and all of the steps and all of the surgeries and all of the chemo, like it's just too overwhelming. So I like to not even do day by day. I say hour by hour, and because it is incredibly overwhelming and it's a lot. And I think I kind of I compartmentalized everything. When I was going through surgery, I tried not to think about the chemo too much, or to overwhelm myself with knowing that that was going to be like another wave. I was scared to death, honestly. I was scared out of my mind. I was afraid to lose my hair. I was afraid to lose my life, not in that order. My lashes. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to be a good parent. Oh my God, I didn't mean to get emotional. I was afraid that of just like everything seemed like really scary. And this is wild. So I'm going to share this with you. Not very religious. I just felt like I needed to believe in something. And a friend of mine told me about an energy healer. And now I meditate and I love Reiki and all this stuff, but I never was into any of this. So I went to an energy healer who lives near me, and she performed Reiki. And I remember crying, and I was so scared of chemo. I'm like, I don't want to die. I am so afraid of chemo. And she said, I want you to do something for me. Take your shoes off. I was like, what? She's like, take your shoes off. I want you to put your feet on the ground. And really, and if you're ever feeling like this, and I still do this to this day, I will put my feet in the ground. And she said to me, today, right now, is the only guarantee that any of us have. Anybody. And that grounds me. And it's really hard. And she said, the chemo, when you see like the chemo juice, we call it the red devil, don't look at it as like bad. Don't look at it as something that is going to hurt you. Look at it as your light, as your bridge to the next part of your life. And for those that are metastatic that are listening, it could bring you more life and longevity and even more years, and not to look at it as a scary, thing that's going to hurt you. And it's so hard because the symptoms can be very, very debilitating. But I just had to grab onto something. It was several hours. The recovery wasn't terrible, but reconstruction is a couple of surgeries, and in some cases, it could be multiple surgeries. Again, everyone is different. I had no idea what to expect. And the one thing I wish I had known actually are the emotional side effects of the medication. So I could joke about it now, but I remember after getting my steroid injection, I was like Superwoman for like an entire day. I had such a crazy amount of energy, and I'm sure a lot of people listening will be able to relate to this. But I would like clean the entire house. I would make enough food for like the entire week, and then I would literally collapse. And I took advantage of those times so I could, prepare the house and do things. But it was a wild roller coaster ride that I wish I had known more about that part of it. I didn't have a lot. I thought before one of the first questions I had was like, oh my God, I'm going to be throwing up the whole time. I'm going to be nauseous. And my oncologist said, Melissa, if you're nauseous, then we're not doing our job. So I didn't have a tremendous amount of issues with that because I was balancing out with medication. But the side effects were, it's especially with my type of chemotherapy, the ACT, it's layered, it's like progressive. So at first I'm like, the first infusion, I'm like, I feel great. Like, what's the deal? And then as you go, you get, I think the fatigue really got me. And also like, my appetite was weird. Like 1 minute I didn't want to eat anything. And then I had like it was almost like being pregnant, like a weird craving for mac and cheese, like out of nowhere. And then I remember at one point I couldn't even look at chicken or fish. And again, everyone is different. Yeah, I mean, so I had no lymph node involvement, luckily, and that's why I was diagnosed as stage 1. And look, I don't think they could have considered me an ED after the surgery because even though the tumor was removed, the reason we do chemotherapy is to annihilate any cells that could have escaped. So, to the best of my knowledge, I am NED. I continue to see my oncologist. It's weird to say that it's just annual now, and it took me a while to get used to that. It's a weird thing with cancer. A lot of us don't want to be told, all right, you're dismissed now. It's like, no, 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 please keep watching me. My oncologist actually was in the military, so we had like these funny little inside jokes. Like right before chemo, he would pat me on the back and be like, locked and loaded. And then on my last appointment with him, after the last chemo, he said, Melissa, survivorship is the hardest part. And I didn't really understand it because I was kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I just had my last infusion. And I can't wait to run. I'm running home. But it really is, because when you're going for all these appointments and you're being closely watched, and you're having your infusions, I say it's like a womb. It's like you're inside a womb and it's safe, and you're being watched, and there's a certain level of comfort and safety with that. But then when you're told everything's good, go on with your life, it's like, wait a second, no. I still want you to check me. And that's human nature. Of course we want that, to feel safe. Well, I think my biggest challenge really is now my daughters, and helping them navigate, especially because we have such a strong family history, and navigating them through genetic testing and all that. But, I would say, I think a lot of us could be really hard on ourselves. Like, oh, I can't believe I had a glass of wine. I shouldn't have done that. Or I can't believe I had a cheeseburger. I think with survivorship comes like, it's okay, everything in moderation, to enjoy yourself and to allow yourself to enjoy. I think, that can sometimes be a challenge I think we could be very, very hard on ourselves. And I think something that I still struggle with as a cancer survivor is at the end of the day, I never feel satisfied. I'm like, I didn't get it all done. Like there's this need to like get it all done every single day. And then when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was like, once I knew what my course of treatment was, I was like, okay, I don't need to look like a supermodel. I just want to look like myself. And how am I going to have a meeting with Vogue magazine if I look like I have cancer, And I really just wanted to maintain my integrity. And that's such an important word to me. Because when you lose your hair and your lashes, it's very easy to lose your femininity. And I went online. I'm like, where's the Vogue of breast cancer? And nothing was in one place. I'm like, where do I get lashes? Where do I get wigs from? How do I tie a scarf? What kind of makeup should I wear? So in the middle of all this, I woke up one morning, and then it was weird. It just came to me. I'm like, cancer fashionista. So I started a blog, and when I realized that there were other women out there that needed the resources that I needed, I'm like, this is cool. So I'm like, I guess I'll throw something on Facebook. Maybe I'll put something on Instagram. Next thing you know, fast forward a few years later, now I'm, like I mentioned, I'm the board chair for the Triple Negative Breast Cancer Foundation. I'm a full-time breast cancer advocate. And I founded my podcast, Dear Cancer, I'm Beautiful, which is like a really fun extension of Cancer Fashionista. And survivorship means something different to so many people, especially in our community. There's survivorship, there's thrivership. I think if you can face your fear and get through each day the best that you can and enjoy your life, even as you're going through a diagnosis, as you're going through treatment. I think there were so many times that I felt so sad and so depressed and in such a dark place. And these things are, our outcomes, the treatment, it's out of our control. But if there's one thing I've learned, especially from watching a lot of my metastatic friends in the community, is to try and enjoy each day as much as you can. And really, really important is to really advocate for yourself. Oftentimes, if that little voice inside you is like, I don't know if I really like what this doctor's telling me. I feel like I think this is something. I don't think it should be dismissed. Do not ignore that voice. Get another opinion. I can't stress it enough. And if you feel like your doctor doesn't have time to talk to you, like if their hand is on the doorknob, the second you start talking, get another doctor. Because another thing I learned is that think of your doctor as your consultant. They work for you, and you have the choice to seek another consultant.